I'd like to thank my patrons for making this video possible, especially Jeff Wardell, whose philosophical power is known throughout the land and has attracted both the love of students and the ire of politicians, both of which he handles in the same way, by educating them. All right, here we are. We're drawing, we're drawing away. It's back to drawing. It's back to doing the incredible drawing task. It's back to making pictures, making images, making illusions with dust on paper, the ever-potent dust on paper. I was just in Italy. That's true. I was just there. I was on a vacation. I feel both very inspired and recharged and excited and horribly jet lagged. I am definitely horribly jet lagged right now. Jet lag is a real thing, but man, that's a good place. That is a really good place. They got a lot of, man, that place is covered in sculpture. I love sculpture. As a draftsman, I feel like so many of my ideas really come down to me wishing I was a sculptor, but I'm drawing instead. I'm just trying to get the same feeling. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder about that, but I really love sculpture, and that place is teeming with it. It's teeming with it. I feel like it really aligns with my taste. It's like, oh, you don't know how to finish this building? Why don't you just fill all the parts you're confused about with complete figures sculpted in marble? How does that sound? That sound like a good thing? Oh, you don't know how to finish that fountain? How to do like a graceful topper to that fountain or anything like that? Why don't you just put a giant writhing muscular body on the top? You ever think about that as a way to finish it? Yeah, that's my taste. That aligns. I don't know. I really felt like everything was really singing my heart song over there. Anyway, it was great. Very inspired. I'm going to try to put the results of that inspiration on this YouTube channel. It gave me so many ideas. I didn't really draw for like 2 weeks. That's how long I was there. Basically didn't draw anything. Took a couple scribbly notes here and there. But besides that, let the hand get rusty. Let the old drawing skill sort of flit away. And now this sketch that we're looking at here is the first sketch that I did when I got back. Just had to do something to get the machinery going again. Definitely inspired by all of the writhing anatomy and nudity that I saw in Italy. Just want to hang out with that for a while. Inspired in many ways. Inspired first by the incredible quality of a lot of what I saw there in all forms: architecture, painting, sculpture, drawing, even city planning. Just so many things. Everything was so inspirational. That goddamn fly. That fly was circling my hand for all of this drawing. I don't know if you'll see me try to get it a couple times in this recording. I believe I failed across the board. I could not get rid of it, so he'll be a companion throughout this one. What the heck was I saying? Anyway, yeah, very inspired by all sorts of stuff that was in Italy. I was in Florence and Rome, and inspired by the incredible quality of it. Also inspired by the sheer effort, the just loving workmanlike quality that a lot of it had. Not in a negative way at all, but just some of the things that you look at, like, the sheer amount of sculptures that would decorate a space or the outside of a cathedral or anything like that. Just the acceptance and love of saying, all right, this thing needs 500 complete figures for its exterior. Sure, rock on, let's do it. Let's just get it done. It'll take 100 years. Many of the artists, they're going to die before this is done and they ever get to see the finished product, and they don't mind. It's just a huge effort. Love that. Love that quality. Super inspirational quality. And it really achieved a sort of overwhelming divine perfection through the sheer scale and grandeur of the ambition and not through the perfection of any individual element. That was super inspirational as well. That's something that I have definitely encountered on my road through drawing, but this really is making me revisit it and think about it again and take it more seriously. What do I mean by that? It's not really, I don't mean it pejoratively at all. I don't mean it as, I'm not knocking it at all, but if we're perfectly honest with ourselves, some of these things that we look at, and when I say some of these things, I'm talking about some of the greatest masterpieces in the history of art, or architecture, anything. You look at them and your first impression is, this is perfect. This is as good as it gets. This is utterly refined and immaculate, and there's a reason that this has stood the test of time and it's been around forever. It's just flawless. And it is that feeling is true, but it is a feeling that the artist consciously intended to give the viewer. And upon inspection, you find that it's not really that, right? Let's say that you're looking at this facade of a cathedral that has, dozens and dozens of sculpture elements on it, and your first impression is they're just perfect. It's perfect. The anatomy, the gesture, the structure, the characterization, the reality of it, it's all just perfect. When you put on your skeptical glasses and you look at it, it is, of course, not, right? Some of the sculptures are better than others. Some of them are kind of underwhelming. Some of them are really, whoa, just freaking amazing, and maybe are perfect, but they are the outliers. And the other ones are not that. And they don't need to be that to give the feeling of a job well done and just incredible quality. And I definitely tend towards the perfectionist. If I hadn't done a lot of work to reel back my perfectionism, I probably, there wouldn't be any of my stuff out in the world. It would have been very easy for me to just hide away and never share anything. So as someone who is very attuned to defeating perfectionism and letting things go and working to the project and the importance of just doing what the art needs instead of what you need, I found that super inspirational. I was inspired by the fact that, to me, I was experiencing these works of art as just as good as it gets, as good as it gets, as good as I would ever ask for. But then upon inspection, it was like, it didn't need to be perfect, right? You could get that feeling without everything being just the masterpiece, right? You could create excellent work on just doing it, on just getting it done and doing competent work and doing it well enough. It is, again, maybe that sounds like there's some other ideal out there. It's just like, no, every bit of it is just absolutely perfect and it's completely untouchable and it's as good as it gets. It might sound like I'm saying that is out there. I don't think it is. I don't think that's actually possible. I don't think it's possible at all to do that. So that's not even a possibility. So I'm not entertaining the idea that that's a possibility. What I'm talking about is the framework, how you think about it as the artist, as you go through it, just remembering more often that it can be great. You can do an excellent job, even if every little element is not perfectly refined and not just right? Just get through it. Just make the thing, make stuff, make the stuff, make the stuff, make the stuff. Woo! Very excited to make the stuff. Very excited to make more things. I'm going to get there. I'm going to make the things. I'm going to make a lot of things. I crash landed back from Italy very recently, and unfortunately I got to sneak this sketch in. I'm sneaking this sketch in there, but you know how it is when you go on vacation. The chores build up because you were gone. There's a lot of things that you left behind, and you gotta catch up on them. I'm also crash landing right into moving as well. So I really just got back from vacation, and then I had like a day, and in that day I snuck in this drawing. And now I gotta move. I gotta quickly get over to my new, my old digs, and get all my stuff unpacked and get my setup reset up. So I can't just sink into producing a lot of work just yet, but I'm looking forward to it. And even though a few days are going by here, I don't want the move and all of the chores and everything like that to make me forget the inspiration that I got from Italy. Italy was just amazing. So I'm going to try to keep that alive in my heart. I am also here giving myself the license to bring it up again and again over the next several videos. This is not the last time I'm going to talk about it, because I want to be open to be able to go a little bit more in depth into certain things that I saw that really taught me really important lessons, or to go into more detail about specific epiphanies and destructions of perfection and things that really just left an impression on me. So I'm going to bring that up again. I'm going to come back to that. And I'll even show some vacation photos, slideshow style. I'll do it up like an old man boring his family to tears. We'll have fun. We'll have fun. Slash boredom. We'll have fun / boredom. All right, what am I drawing here? Actually, what this is, you know what? You will get a better idea for what this is in the next few videos. This is for a bigger thing that if I tried to explain it here right now, just looking at this out of context, it would probably just seem more confusing. So let's just say for now that this is a sketch of a group of figures and that I was imagining it as just a study for how I could arrange like a group of figures for a sculpture or something like that, as if you were trying to design or think through ideas for a fountain or a monument or something of the sort. So some sort of sculptural grouping. Even that, at this level, that's really just a conceit to have in mind while I draw, because there's really not much about this, anything that would indicate, be like a hard point for something like that. I didn't really indicate a base of any sort yet. I didn't wrap them around any kind of pillar or try to place them in space in relation to each other such that their supports or anything like that would make sense. It's just an abstraction to keep in mind, something so that, you know, I feel like recently I've come to realize how important it is to just have something bigger in mind while you work. You know, it's easy just to make one thing everything. You know, you just sit down, you start drawing, maybe you have some light ideas around it, but the main thing that you're thinking about when you're drawing is, this has to be the best. You know, this has to be my best one. This has to be the ultimate version of my skill. It has to be clear that I'm better than ever. Like, this has to be my best one. And maybe you have these other little trappings around it, some light emotion that you're trying to communicate or something like that. But that's all very secondary. Your number one focus is, this has to be the best one that I've done or I'm going to be unsatisfied. And that's just really unhealthy thinking after a while. I think it's unrealistic to think that you're always going to do your best one, you know, just a straight linear line right up. You know, that's not going to happen. If that was going to happen, it'd be happening to everybody, you know, and everybody would just be getting this perfect return on investment. Just every piece that they do is better than the last, but we know that's not how it works. So it's very unrealistic to think that you will get that for yourself. And yeah, I'm realizing that it's better to just have something bigger in mind, even if you haven't worked it out completely. Just have some sort of structure around it, some container that holds that thing that you're drawing. So like I said, I do have a bigger container than just, oh, this is a sculptural group. I have a much bigger container than that. But we'll talk about that in a couple videos when I just start breaking down some of that concept on its own. But what's going on here is a lot of anatomy, real bread and butter stuff here, people. Anatomy, muscles, moving the figure around, breaking it, transforming it, letting it get demonic, letting it get strange, letting it be edited, changed, not normal. Bread and butter stuff, my favorite stuff. These stayed pretty regular. I thought I was going to go more transmogrified when I started on these, but I guess I hadn't drawn in a while, so it's very easy for me to just let them become regular figures. You know, always you start averaging down to typical proportions, typical human silhouette, everything like that. I find I have to sort of remain conscious while I draw in order to break my proportional and silhouette norms. You know, I've practiced doing, you know, an average figure is hard enough, right? Even just a standing average figure is hard enough to draw and can be drawn many ways and have an insane amount of refinement. So I find that if I'm not consciously remembering, like, I want it to be weird, I want it to have a very unusual silhouette, I don't want it to look like a normally proportioned person. If I don't have that at least somewhat in mind for most of the drawing process, it slips away. It gets averaged down. It gets averaged out. And it definitely did here. But usually if I build up a lot of momentum, if I'm drawing a lot, if I'm making a lot of pictures, that becomes easier and easier and easier to remember. I think there's just a lot to be said for drawing enough that you kind of get bored with your own work. You know, there's an extreme version of that where you get kind of drawing drunk. You know, you've drawn so much that you can't even really see it anymore. You're just like, oh, here's another one because it's my habit. I just do this all the time, blah. And you're just like not connecting with what you're doing, right? That's bad. And trust me, that is a thing, right? If you draw a lot, drawing drunkenness is a real condition, and it sucks. It really sucks. You just feel like you can't access what you're doing at all. You know, it's behind a filmy, thin screen, and you can't get through it and touch it. It's not the best. But yeah, the opposite side of that, the drawing drunkenness is on the extreme end of that, but there is that little useful bit of it where just you're a little fed up with your usual tricks. You know, that's usually pretty good. You're drawing enough that you're seeing your habits and you're seeing how you do things over and over and over and over again. And, you know, if you're drawing pretty rarely or you don't have a strong habit built up, you pull off one figure that looks decent and you're just like, oh, I did it. This is great. Wow, I could just do this over and over again. Aren't I lucky that I could even pull it off? And yeah, that's true. Yeah, and that's good. But when you're on the fifth one of those, if you've been doing them pretty regularly and you remember what it was like to do the one the day before, and then the one the day before that, and the one the day before that, and you're doing it the same way and they're coming out the same, then right there, right at that edge, you get the good amount of boredom with what you're doing. Then you start asking questions. Then you start wondering, all right, how can I flip this? How can I try to make this a different statement in a bigger way earlier on? How can I make this challenge me? How can I just spark my own interest on this one? You know, that's usually a lot easier with momentum and mileage behind you. And I usually get that. I can get there in a few days of working with the same medium in the same mode, you know? So hopefully I'll get there with the pencils. I want to go back into I was doing digital for a while there before I left for Italy. And, you know, seeing all of that traditional art, of course, just made me want to like, forget it, just go back to pencils. I mean, I'm always going back to pencils. They're my favorite thing. I do a ton of work in them, but even the little bit of time I was spending doing digital, my time in Italy just made me want to, forget it. Just back to traditional, back to just drawing, just being connected with the content in the realest, most direct way possible. It's weird to me how I sort of fell out of love with digital. I used to really love digital work. I would say that it was the first thing that sparked my desire to really go on an improvement focus journey. You know, there was I was always drawing in pencil. I was always doing traditional work. Pencil was where I started, and I never stopped. I did do pencils basically always, all throughout my drawing journey, but I was never much confused by pencil. I knew I wasn't as good as I wanted to be, and I knew that I needed to improve and that that improvement was possible. But I guess because of what pencil is, like, it's graphite, and there's a few different hardnesses of graphite, and sure, there's different pencils, but it's just the graphite touching the tip, and there's, 12 hardnesses or whatever, and most people don't use more than a few. And there's a few papers, and you can try them, and they're not that hard to find, and they're pretty cheap. It always seemed to me like it just seemed less confusing to me how to get better at pencil. It's just pretty straightforward. It's clear you need to draw more, right? You just need to understand the concepts better and draw a lot and apply the concepts more successfully. So that never, I don't know, I guess pencil wasn't the thing that sparked the sort of aggressive, like, I got to figure this out. How's this possible thing, right? Digital, I think, actually was the first thing that did that for me. When I got into digital painting when I was much younger, that didn't have the directness and the straightforwardness of drawing on paper. That had all of these questions and unknowns and small mysteries and what the heck is this and how do you do that, and the tools, just the variety of the tools, and it just had a different feeling. And that sort of sparked in me, like, I have to figure it out. I need to ask the right questions to the right people and get the right knowledge and figure out how the heck you actually do this. And that then transferred to my pencil work later, right? It revealed to me that maybe I wasn't thinking deeply enough about the pencil work. Maybe the assumption that it was simple and clear was a little bit premature, which it was. It was coming from my naive youth. So that did eventually transfer to my traditional thinking, but it was the digital that sparked it initially. Anyway, that sure felt like love for a very long time. I mean, I was very, very interested. I was doing it all the time, always experimenting with things, always just popping open a new Photoshop file, painting some little idea that came to mind real quick, or some method for, I think if you do it this way, it'll look like this. I mean, I really spent so much time doing that for years, like near a decade, more than a decade, just nonstop, thinking about it all the time. And maybe it's just a function of getting older, but now I basically avoid it at all costs. I don't know what it is. I say maybe it's because I'm getting older, because I don't know. I mean, when I was a kid, with all that youthful energy, is it energy? What am I trying to say? When I was a kid, I was perfectly fine with spending all day, every day staring at a screen, play video games, do digital art, rinse, dry, repeat over and over again. Now I'm like, I got to look at a plant. I really, really need to look at a tree for some substantial portion of the day. And now I'm painfully aware of how uncomfortable I am while I'm staring at a screen, all the moments that I do it. And I still have to spend a lot of time drawing, but at least when I'm drawing on a piece of paper, I'm not staring at a screen. At least I'm looking at a reflective instead of a light emitting surface. And I can kind of move it around and adjust my spine. And I don't know, it goes beyond ergonomics, though. It really is something deeper than that. And that sure sounds like some old man stuff to say, but maybe that was enough to break my relationship with digital. Now I really just spend as much time as I can drawing on paper. I still go back to digital when I have an idea that's really about color, because I spent so much time doing digital that it did become my primary color medium. I've done a lot of traditional painting. I've done a bunch of work in acrylics, a lot of watercolor and gouache. I've done a lot of watercolor and gouache painting, casein as well, bit of oils, spent some stints doing oils. So I've done a lot of traditional painting, but I spent so much aggressive focused time with digital that it still remains my color medium. So whenever I have an idea that revolves around color, something that presents itself as a color idea, I do go back to digital. But anything that's not specifically that, just do a traditional. Just stick to traditional. Just feels more direct, more healthy for me. But it fascinates me. It really does fascinate me that this medium, digital, that I had such an intimate and powerful connection with for so long, and for a big period there, I was like, this is my medium. Like, this is what I do, and this is what I want to be good at. And digital will be the medium in which I make my work, in heavy air quotes, right? Like, when people think of a Steven Zapata artwork, they will think of a digital picture, right? That's what I thought for so long. And no, not at all. Not at all. That is not how it went at all. It completely flipped. Now that's just my work medium. That's just how I get client work done. And my real, the stuff that I really think about now and that I connect with the most, and what I imagine people will think of as one of my pieces, and that people do think of my pieces as, is pencil. It's just pencil. I don't know, maybe pencil was just always so close early on that, I took it for granted. It was like, it's too intimate, it was there. It was right there under my nose for a long time. I went through a weird period where I thought I really shouldn't deliver work or practice, or especially in school. When I was in school and college, I went through a period where I really resisted doing homework in pencil because I was like, oh, I need to be getting better at digital, right? Like pencil is so comfort zone. I really shouldn't be working like that, which is, in hindsight, that was crazy. I mean, it probably did help me, just the mileage, spend some time. It probably did help me a bit, spending some of that time working in these other tools. But I think I probably suffered a lot for not using my most comforting medium, just to use that language. I probably did suffer for not using my most comfortable medium in the parts of the process where it was really supposed to be about idea generation and seeking rather than the manner of executing, right? And I don't know, if I could go back now, I'd tell myself to watch out for that. I really don't see many drawbacks that would have happened there. Probably would have still learned all of the hotkeys and menus that I found while abusing things in Photoshop. But yeah, I really feel like I missed out on better ideas for a lot of design work and projects because I was working with mediums where I was constantly distracted by what I did not know or what I was failing to do tool-wise and how that was hurting my execution. And I would have been just more free and more creative, more likely, if I was using a very comfortable medium for that step. And I could have always gone to the digital part afterwards. But, hang-ups. You ever heard of them? Yeah, artists have them. We have a long list of them. That was a pretty bad one for me for a while. Okay, what goes on with the drawing here? So if I'm not mistaken, everything so far, oh no, I am mistaken. There's a Palomino Blackwing. I was going to say everything so far is 0.5 HB mechanical pencil. And the vast majority of it is. Actually, this might be the first time that I'm taking out the Palomino on this drawing. But doing all the groundwork with just a very light, barely there touch of a mechanical pencil with the HB lead in it. Not able to go very dark. And the usefulness of that is that it keeps everything very low contrast. And for my money, low contrast with pencil work is useful in the beginning stages if you are a form-focused artist. Probably less so if you're a graphic shape-focused artist or something like that. But myself, focusing on form, that's usually what I'm going for. I start rendering early. Because I start rendering early, it's full of mistakes and errors and things that are not ideal. Keep it low contrast. That makes it a little bit more flexible, allows me to correct, allows me to change my mind later. And because I've only been staring at the drawing for an hour or two or less by the time I start rendering, I haven't really built up a sophisticated mental image of the drawing in my mind. And when I say image, I don't mean like a picture. I mean like a mental model, a super sophisticated abstraction of what this drawing should be and what its contents are, right? It's visuals, it's shapes, it's tactile feelings, it's wireframes of how the forms are morphing, and it's 3D sculptures that I'm turning around in my head, and just this and some sort of abstracted real version of this, as if there were real figures, like in a movie, more than a movie, some VR space, like just every possible permutation of those things. That's what the abstract mental model of a picture can be and does become after you've been working on a picture for like a month, let's say. Right? Because your mind has all of this time while you're working on it, while you're in the shower, while you're on the toilet, while you're arguing with somebody, to elaborate and go crazy and build this thing up with ever more layers of sophistication. But when you've only been drawing it for an hour, You don't have that. You just have like your day one first sitting impromptu reactions to what's showing up on the paper, right? So because I don't have that sophisticated model yet, and I know I don't, low contrast is worth it for me because it keeps things very flexible and it makes it's all building up just ever so softly. It's all fog. It's all soft. It's all barely there. Things don't take big bends. They're just barely bending. They're just a little bit more shadow. It's just a little bit more light. This is just, it's slightly facing the light source more than this side. No, low contrast, small changes. And that just gives me room to, well, first off, it gives me room. But the other big thing is that it forces me to slow down, right? Because the feeling of an expanded contrast range of punchy darks, that's a big part of what makes a drawing feel more finished or more complete. So working with something like the 0.5 HB pencil early on just forces me to slow down. It's not going to give me contrast. It really is going to fight me on contrast for a long time. At every turn, it's going to be like, nope, we're staying gray. We're staying super silvery, super shiny. Just, it's not going high contrast. It's going to refuse. And that makes me stick with the drawing longer. That forces me to build up slower. And that just gives me more time to settle into these mental conceptions, these more elaborate mental conceptions, and to build them up with sophistication and layer them and elaborate them. You know, with stuff like this, with form, so much of what makes it look good, what makes it look cool is just, you have a weird, complicated idea for just every little shape that you put down, right? Like those shapes that are going on in the trapezius, the way that it interacts with the spine of the scapula, the way that underneath that there's all these little ripples and striations on teres major and infraspinatus and the tendinous portion of the back of the deltoid. All of the interactions there and all the little shapes that are going on there, none of those need be accurate, right? They're not accurate to anything. I'm not looking at a reference while I do this. I'm making it up. It's not about them speaking to some sort of ideal model or correct version of what should be there, right? That doesn't exist. Everybody's back looks different. Everyone's musculature looks different. And it's a preconception to think that correction there, that correctness there is what people are looking for in that moment in the drawing. They're not. That's not what most people are looking for. Some freaks are looking for that, but they're the absolute minority. People are just looking for interesting. And a lot of people are looking for, oh, I didn't even know that I wanted that kind of interesting. They just need something interesting. And that's your job as the artist to show up with. And it's just, so much of it just comes down to sticking with that little spot and dreaming it, just dreaming something up, just not being afraid, not being caught up, not being distracted, worrying about the stuff that I just listed. Like, am I doing it right or something like that? Just stick with that little spot and think of something you can put down that is just vaguely interesting at all. You know, that mean really just break it up and make it look cool. Do a medium shape, do a large shape, do a small shape, make this thing slide into that, make this pass over this. If you have a lot of familiarity with how any particular area on something is usually done in a drawing, just doing something new, you know, that's perfectly valid as well. I mean, you have, as a consumer of art, you have a big library in your mind of the typical ways things are done, right? And you probably get excited when you see something that looks good and is also new, right? Like, oh, I've never seen someone do that turn on the leg quite like that before. It's perfectly valid to hunt for that. Just look for that. What's new? What's a way that you can do it new while also keeping it looking like what it is, keeping it cohesive? Just dreaming up something there, and then in every other part of the drawing, that's really so much of the work. And the ability to do that is really tied up with, like I said, the ability to have those elaborate models of what you're doing in your head. You know, it applies to the whole figure. It also applies to each little area. You're just like, well, it's going to have a long roll off on this part of the muscle. It's going to have a sharp, tight turn on this part of the muscle. The interactions between these little striations, well, they're going to be a zigzag pattern instead of an S-shaped pattern. And maybe I'm going to look for a moment where I can do some pattern, right? Maybe as the ribs show up underneath the latissimus dorsi, I'm going to get a pattern of stripes going in that area. That's just building up models, elaborating them, having some thoughtful image of them in your mind, consciously or subconsciously, and letting it layer into the drawing and show up and add interest. It's very difficult, very abstract kind of thing to parse out, but rest assured that is what everyone is doing while they're drawing, and it is what everyone that is working on a very high level is doing while they're drawing. So doing that, crawling around the picture, trying to make my little mental model, letting it arise naturally, giving them horns because they're demons, so whatever. I had an idea on this one to do the horns sort of like Baroque filigree, obviously because I was looking at a lot of it in Italy and looking at it in all of the work that I was seeing, but also because, you know, this is something for Paradise Lost, which we'll discuss in a few videos, but, you know, the demons in Paradise Lost can take not the demons, the fallen, they're demons, but they can take any shape. You know, they're not actually limited to one shape. So I like the idea of putting the horns on them because it just speaks to our archetypes, you know, that we're dealing with classic Christian archetypal fallen angels. We tend to think of them as having horns, but it is alluding to the fact that they don't have to fit that mold, right? So if they're, let's say, inhabiting their glorious palace, Pandemonium, and are, you know, celebrating their own opulence and their own strength and their own nobility and their mastery over themselves, they can take a form, whether in the details or in the gross shapes, that is more grand and elaborate and sort of celebratory, festive, something like that. Just, it can be decorative. You know, they can change that part of themselves to be more decorative. And of course, that just gives me some sort of design excuse to indulge in what I would do anyway, which is just laying the kinds of abstract design elements that I like over more traditional anatomical rendering and things like that, which is something I've been doing for a while now. And I really do just do it because I love it and it's fun, and I like sort of doing a modeling and rendering pass over those elements. But it's nice when it fits with some part of the project as well. You know, it's nice when it actually speaks to some core idea or concept within the actual project itself, which I guess is why I've been coming back to Paradise Lost over and over and over again. It really is the perfect setup for the stuff that I really like to do. Increasing the contrast slowly here, you can see that I dropped some pretty dark darks around those eyes and those eyebrows, and I also filled in the hair on those two figures, made it noticeably darker than the values on the flesh, and some of the areas like on the figure that is facing us, the areas on his rib cage on the right, darken those down with the Palomino Blackwing pencil so that they're noticeably darker than the other areas of the flesh. So just opening up the contrast range bit by bit, letting things get darker. I really, I just got to draw like this. I don't know why. I can't just nail down the drawing first on its own. I need to see the values. Because the drawing, just the linear drawing, has never been enough for me to evaluate if the drawing is working structurally. Because the lines are just the incidental area where the form runs tangent to your eye line. Great, super useful. No, for my kind of drawing, there's so much that needs to happen on the inside of the outer contour lines. That's really where I spend most of my time drawing, is making sure that those shadow shapes communicate my mental conception of those forms. So if I just work with the abstract lines, I can do that for hours. And then as soon as I start adding drawing on the inside, shading, that is to say, I realize, oh, that's all wrong. It's not going to give me what I wanted. What I needed was to see that incidental meeting of the form in the background and some indication of the forms that are going to be represented on the inside of those contours early on. I need to compare them with each other and elaborate them against each other and find ways to make them speak to each other and to design towards each other and to really be in cooperation, right? Because those exterior angles, for example, they're extremely subtly connected to everything that happens on the inside, but they're also just very directly connected. Like if you're looking at the turn of a deltoid, for example, right? Like that one that's right next to my thumb right now. If you're looking at the way that that turns down to go into the rest of the arm, that downward turn of the plane, if you have a top light, where that plane of the deltoid turns away and dips back down into the arm, your mind is always going to read that as, okay, then if this is a generally top-lit scenario, that is going to be where that whole form on the inside turns downward and into shadow. So you have to darken the gradients on the inside of that deltoid along a horizontal ribbon that starts at the exact turning point of that deltoid dipping downwards. And if you don't, it'll never look right. It'll never feel right. The other arbitrary shading that you do on the inside will always be in conflict with what the viewer's eye knows about that form just based on the simple forms on the outside, right? So they're already telling the viewer a lot, and it needs to be respected when you go to model and shade and render on the inside. So like I said, with those connections being so direct and so intimate, I would rather just look at them early. I want to see them early and fix them and evaluate them and do things with them. I know maybe that seems obvious to some people, but it's pretty amazing how many drawings you look at where, let's say it's a face in a 3/4 view, and it's someone who has like these high chiseled cheekbones, like a young person or something like that. And they think they're lighting it as if this character is in top light, but where that noticeable strong cheekbone hits its peak and then turns down and away and down into the chin. And it's all just a smooth curve down from there with no pops out from that. When you say it, it sounds obvious. It's like everything under that peak of the cheekbone has to be darker, right? Because the light's from up top. That simple angle turn of those exterior lines commits you to making sure that everything from that point downward on the head is going to get darker, and everything upward has to be lighter. And just people ignore that. They don't paint that at all. And it's because they're not making the values on the inside speak with what the lines on the outside are saying about the form at all. They're all the same thing. It's all just form, right? You're seeing on the contour, you're seeing it at the edge, and everywhere in between the contours, you are seeing it sort of flat, laying flat towards your eye, but it's all form. And you need to make everything respect each other and talk to each other if you want your renderings to feel solid. All right, so I'm filling in some spaces with a mechanical pencil here, letting them get a generalized gray tone on them. Now I'm going to take a darker pencil and use it to put some anchor shapes in this area of the serratus and external oblique muscles here. So you can see that's going down much darker than everything else. The trick here when I'm doing a moment like this is, and this is pretty radical, I know this is pretty crazy, but I'm just trying to make every little stroke that I put down kind of cool. Yeah, I know it's wild. It's pretty experimental, but that's really it. That's really it. That's amazing how easy it is to forget to do that. And you sort of get caught up in the land of, oh, I'm drawing this muscle and it goes this way. It's just, but just, can you make one a little bit hooky and then this one a little bit thinner, and then maybe this one has like a cool little spiral or something like that at the end, and maybe this one, you know, right before it ends, it has like a little extra dot or something. Like just anything, just make them just a little cool. Just give it something cool, every little one that you put down. And it's amazing how finicky that is, because when the forms are small, it really does kind of come down to just little things about how you move your hand, you know, like even on little shapes like that. I mean, you can't see it, you know, you could probably barely even see it if you were right next to me while I was drawing, and you certainly can't see it while something is sped up. This is only 2x sped up, and still you wouldn't be able to see this, but each one of those little dark areas on the serratus, it's not one line, it's a few, right? And I'm laying a sharp one, a hard one down first, and then I'm sort of slightly feathering like 2 or 3 more right next to it, slightly softer, outwards, upwards towards the light. And why is that? It's just so that it's not one perfect, boring thing. It's so that even these tiny little forms that I'm just putting down in a second have some indication of gradient variety and variety of edge. So there's a little bit sharper in one part, it's a little bit hard, it's a little bit softer in one part, and then that's aligning with the direction of the light, so it's softening and lightening up as it goes towards the light, and it creates room for subtle transitions. Just that softer part indicates a slightly wider roll on that form, that sharper part indicates a slightly tighter form, roll on that form. And you do that a billion times in a drawing, and you stack it, and before you know it, it's interesting. And interesting means it looks right. That's it. Just it does it. If it looks interesting but it's not right, no one's gonna care. People are still gonna like it. It's fine, and people will, because it looks interesting, because it looks compelling, because it looks cool. Most people will just look at it and they will accept that it is quote unquote right, that it is structured, that it is lovely, that it is good. You know, people don't even know what quantifiers they're putting on art, right? Like to actually consciously try to know what quantifiers you're putting on art would require you to be like a real art critic or a philosopher or something like that. That's not what most people are doing, right? They're just getting a vibe off of it. And if the vibe feels good, they'll just say everything about it. They'll just say stuff that doesn't even make sense about it. Stuff that looks nothing like a photo, they'll just be like, oh, it looks like a photo, because that's just the only compliment they can give or something like that. So the interest, the vibe, that produces the feeling, the philosophical conception of rightness. Oh, it's right, it's done well. It's like, who knows? That depends on your individual standards. It depends on your axioms. All that really matters is it cool? Is it interesting? Does it have some amount of love peppered over it, and some variety, and some care, some crafting care to all of the pertinent areas, you know, whether they be simple or complex, and big and broad, or small and finicky and detailed. There's ways to hit that with every possible goal that you may have. You know, when it gets late at night and you get kind of punchy and you keep seeing things like flashing in the corner of your eye, you wonder if they're mice or bugs. And then you look over there and you're like, no, it's not. It was nothing. And then as soon as you look away, you see it again. Okay, between this sentence and the last, I moved, and I'm in a louder environment now. So if you hear any new sounds, new and exciting sounds, please just bear with me here as I figure out the best audio setup for this environment. It's going to take some experimentation. Sorry. All right, so what am I doing to this poor drawing? I'm abusing it here with my little blending stump. I do use really only the small blending stump now. I was using 3 different sizes for a while. I was using a big one, medium one, and a small one, just depending on the size of the form that I was softening or drawing with the blending stump. And I don't know, lately I'm just using the little one. I don't think that's the right call for everyone. I think it just aligns with me for the kinds of drawings that I do. If I'm gonna finish a drawing completely, my taste, my hacky Baroque taste, is such that I will want to put little gradients and details and rolls of form basically everywhere. You know, I'll want to add information to as much of the surface as I can. And that means that those little rolls would be happening anyway, right? So I'm rarely looking for a completely flat, undifferentiated area of value, which it would be easier or cleaner to make with the larger blending stump. Because I'm not looking for that, I can use the smaller blending stump, and all of the little streaks and the little bits that it adds when I soften things with it are perfectly fine because they're all just in line with the detail and the info that I would put there anyway. In fact, I react to them a lot of the time. I use them to get ideas for, oh, maybe I'll put a little sub form here, a little walnut shape there, or something like that. Which you have to be careful about, of course. You want to keep the primary shapes dominant on most of these big organic forms. It's very hard to remember to do that. It's not how we tend to think, so it's counterintuitive. And we need to sort of remind ourselves and train ourselves to think of that stuff instead of the surface information instead. Let me try to elaborate on that a bit. Okay, so the rib cage, for example, like the one that I'm erasing on right now, it is first and foremost, its primary shape is that it is, well, you know, even that is actually up for debate. It's either a cube or it's spherical, right? Not spherical, think like an egg shape, right? Maybe like a flattened egg, something like that. So it's ovoid or something like that. That is its primary shape. And that is not just a little bit more important than the shape of something like the pectorals or the abdominal muscles or anything like that. It's not just a little bit more important, it is vastly more important, incredibly more important. So much more important, in fact, that the pecs and the abs basically don't matter. They just don't matter. They mean nothing. They add nothing. They contribute nothing. The abs and the pecs and the details of the belly button and the external oblique, they are so utterly insignificant compared to the ovoid / cube shape of the rib cage that it's like a family of 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and 4-year-olds and the 2 parents. And the parents contribute everything, absolutely everything. And the children would die on their own. They couldn't survive. They couldn't feed themselves. If they were just locked in the house alone, they could not rise to the challenge of acquiring new food or making money or taking care of themselves, like their hygiene and their cleanliness. They are insignificant to the operations of the familial unit. And everything comes down to mom and dad. And it's unbelievable that in the light of this, the children do not respect them. They don't respect them. They're constantly disobedient, insubordinate, and they think that they can just get by on their little monkey shines, on their charms. And that is what you need to keep in mind when you are drawing the rib cage. All right, remember the primary shape. Remember mommy and daddy. Remember that they run the show. And this is very difficult because We don't think that way. That's not how we think. When you look at, okay, this maybe sounds weird, right? This is maybe going to sound a little weird, but I do think this is probably this is true. I do really think this is true, and that this basic psychological effect makes us draw wrong. All right, I'm not trying to be funny here. I really do think this is true. Let's say you get a rare glimpse of a really ripped guy. Like, he's really ripped. Like, you've never seen abs like this before. Shredded. When you see him with his shirt off, when those abs hit your eyes, do you think, oh my God, what a beautifully ovoid rib cage he has? Or do you think, wow, I can't believe how the front plane of his chest interacts with the side plane of his chest? Do you think that? No, that's not what we're wired for psychologically. You see the abs and you are ogling and analyzing and remembering what amount to minuscule, almost imperceptible value changes of the absolute subtlest turn of plane on a front plane. And you are blowing it completely out of proportion because you're miring. And miring has a very particular psychological valence. And then when you go to draw, you don't, because you've never, ever looked at a set of abs that you thought was cool and thought, wow, isn't it gorgeous how they're all sitting on a front plane together and are all basically not different from each other in terms of their relation to the light source? You've never, ever once thought that. So it's probably never even occurred to you that it's so true. When you go and sit down, you draw the mental model of it, which to you, the valley between each abdominal might as well be the Grand Canyon, right? Because you find it unbelievable. You can't believe that there's so much division and separation between these. And each one has its own little character and they're all asymmetrical. And you are drawing not the muscle. You are not drawing the anatomy. You are not drawing the truth. You are drawing your myron. You're drawing the psychological, you are drawing the psychological impact of how impressive those abs are to you. And unfortunately, that is all blown out of proportion because you have a whole complex psychological structure built around that based on envy/lust, whatever is on the menu for you in particular. So we have to watch out for that. All right, you've got to get down to the counterintuitive truths of what is actually happening with these structures, which is the primary shape. It is the primary shape. That is first things first. That is the real nature of any object sitting in space that we take as a given and therefore do not respect, and our drawings look terrible because of it. You got to get that in your mind, see through down to the truth of that, and respect that, convey that in the drawings. And when you do that, you arrive, once you finally do get down to showing the anatomical effect, right? The stuff that we remember about a figure, the muscles sitting on the surface, whatever. When you get down to that, if you're respecting the primary shape, you find even what we consider to be really shredded muscles and anatomy, they're all from muscle to muscle, from the muscles that are sitting right next to each other, from one to the other, the plane changes are minuscule. Almost nothing is happening. It's just like a 5-degree slope switching to a 7-degree slope. That is the actual structural difference between that produces the teres major on somebody that is what produces the teres major on somebody's back that makes you go, whoa, is that a sausage glued to the back of his deltoid? That's weird. That is what it is. It's an ever so subtle plane change. It's just, we just overreact. So for example, the back on this figure that I'm working on right now. I'm working on his foot, but look at his back, right? Notice that the real shadow on his back is relegated to this tiny, sinuous, snaking shadow shape at the bottom border of his back, right? That is noticeably darker than all of the other shadows along the breadth of his back, along the big plane of his back, right? That is me trying to respect that only where the back is turning away, completely away, where the latissimus dorsi is rolling away from us at the bottom, that is the only real core shadow on that back. That is the only place where the back will no longer be being hit by this light source, which is above us, to the left of us, and in front of the figure, right? That is the only place where it'll finally be rolling completely away from the light. The rest of his back, all of those anatomical details, they are represented with much more subtle, low contrast form rolls and form changes. And that is hard to do, right? But that respects the fact that most of those planes, which are very, very subtle changes from one to the other, they're being hit by almost the exact same amount of light, right? The change in light is almost not there. So they need to be very low contrast to make that feel authentic, right? You don't have to do that, obviously. If you can go comic book style with it, right? And make every little bulge be its own super dark graphic black shape. And that can work too, as long as you stick with it everywhere, right? That creates a unifying effect. And then it looks good, right? It's not realistic, but who gives a crap? You know, what's realistic isn't necessarily what's good. It's just about producing unified effects. Unity is what makes something work. Unity is what makes something feel coherent and pleasing. So you don't have to do that. You can go the complete other way and do the comic book look. But if you are going for the more rendered or academic or classical look, God, I don't even know what to call it anymore, right? If you're just going for this mode of finishing, of rendering and presenting, that's going to be necessary. You're going to need to very carefully relegate the contrasts on organic forms like this. And the end result, I think, who knows, you can just say, well, it looks great, right? And you can just leave it at that. But I am very interested in why it looks great psychologically, right? There may not be a real answer to that. That's probably not something that we get to know. But my guess is that the reason that it helps the picture, the reason that it feels good, is that when you go from the shadow line, from the core shadow, right, to the other side of the form, the opposite side of the back, right, you wind up going from that shadow side to the contour on the other side with very little interruption. You slide right over all of those low contrast things. And because your eye is not getting caught up, because your eye is not needing to take a break, pause, pull over on the highway to look at this sightseeing stop, which would be a high contrast black hole in the middle of the back, because it's not doing that, it just glides from one side to another. And the psychological effect of that is bigness, like broadness, smoothness, softness. I think it creates that effect. And we do associate that with the way that we look at those forms in reality, right? And whatever amount of information you can put in there as the eye makes that glide, as it transitions over, whatever you can shove in there within that low contrast mode, that would, in this case, that is to say anatomical detail, the more impressed the eye will be, right? The eye will be like, wow, I really went on that journey. I went from the core shadow to the opposite silhouette with no friction, with ease. It feels big and soft, just like real flesh does. But I still learned so much about that shape, about what's going on in that shape. I learned that there's an infraspinatus and a rhomboid and a trapezius and a spine of the scapula and latissimus dorsi and erector spinae. I learned all of those things. And then I learned about all of their individual little shapes, all in the snap of a finger, just one blink of the eye, just a glance. I learned all those things. And the eye finds that delicious. It's like a cocktail. It goes, a well-made cocktail. It's super strong. It's dense. It has a lot of alcohol in it. And by alcohol, I mean drawing quality, but it goes down smooth, yummy, delicious. You know, like that same feeling, you can give that to the eye by carefully controlling these things. I know all of that sounds silly. I'm not kidding. I do actually believe all of that stuff. I do think that that is why that stuff works. And I think about it. I think about it while I make my pictures. I do think about it while I make my pictures, and I think it works. I really do think it helps. So try to do that. Try to be the thoughtful, well-trained barista who is going to take all of these separate elements, right? This shot of liqueur, this bitters, this piece of fruit, and these other ingredients, these separate ingredients that in the hands of an unskilled barista would not go down smooth, would go down harsh, would be a little jarring on the palate. But find a way, the right ratios, the right proportions, the right contrast between these different elements, such that even though they're so strong and could be overpowering and could easily be poorly mixed, they taste unified. They create unity, and the unity makes them go down easy. Same thing, but with drawing. Now, just go for the same thing with drawing. It is possible. You can do that. And it goes for everything in the picture, right? What I've been discussing here is how that works for rendering, for getting across the form. But it also goes for the overall picture, right? The overall picture has moments that are not form. They can be flat, plain, and things like that, or totally abstract graphic elements. But all of those elements can be considered in terms of, do they stop the eye here, or is the point of this that the eye will transition smoothly over this area, right? Hopefully you have a thought, you have an opinion about one or the other for every moment on the surface of your picture. And this is separate from the content, right? There's very few types of content that would insist on one or the other. It's totally possible to do an eye, a back, a car, a cloud in either mode. Any one of those things designed such that either it's supposed to catch the eye and make the eye linger there, or let the eye slide over it and not demand too much from the eye. There's other things for the eye to see. The eye must transit here and go somewhere else instead. Any piece of content can be done either way, and that is what allows you to compose a picture, to design a picture and go for particular effects, right? If you do the transiting opinion all over the picture can feel very soft and calming and soothing. Think Monet's water lilies, right? To me, that those canvases really depend on that opinion, and they produce that feeling beautifully, especially when you see them in person at scale, because they're humongous, and all of that carefully chosen low contrast information takes up your whole field of vision. So your brain just gets a nice dose of peace and beauty. Or you could do high contrast everywhere, no moment where the eye is supposed to glide onwards, right? And that could feel very Baroque, that can feel very Rococo, very aggressive, very overwhelming, right? So, you know, the roof frescoes on a basilica or something like that. And that has a different psychological effect. It feels energetic, right? So if you're looking at the religious paintings on the roof of a basilica, think about in that era, in that time, pictures were rare, and super highly energetic artistic experiences were hyper rare, right? You saw many less pictures in your life if you were a normal person. So there was great utility to associating this experience with the feeling of an overwhelming, truly overwhelming, right? The feeling that you can barely look at it, right? The overwhelming feeling of all of that energy, and seeing what was toiled over to get this effect, the utility of that for making someone feel the power of the institution, of the religious ideas, of the stories that these things represent. They really wanted these things to stay with you, right? Because you don't ever get to see it again once you leave, right? It's not like me, I got to see St. Peter's Basilica and walk around it for a couple hours and try to soak it in as slowly and lovingly as I could. But I knew once I left, I could just look up a photo of it again later, or look at the photos that I took, right? If I wanted to revisit it, and I can do that with everything. My dog, other paintings that I've never seen, or structures that I've never seen in real life. I get to do that whenever I want. Back then, you couldn't do that. There was no looking it up afterwards. There was no postcard to buy on the way out that you could stick to the wall of your surf cabin as you spent the rest of your life in horrible misery and probably dying young and losing children. You didn't have that option. So the overwhelming power of there being no moment of rest, it's all full contrast, full everything is eye catches, that will hopefully ingrain it in your mind, overwhelm you with its energy, make it stay with you, make you believe the propaganda, hopefully. And then also you would remember it. You would be able to carry that with you. And even though you were never going to get to see it again, you could hold it in your heart much more clearly and remember particular moments. And you had this whole smorgasbord of moments to remember. So a lot to be said about eye catches and high contrast and low contrast. This is really all design. This comes down to designing things. This comes down to the principles of design. And this is all, it's a deep, deep subject, an incredibly deep subject. And that's, only a couple of the principles, but it's essential for any artist to wrap their head around this stuff and to find a way to use this stuff in their work. It's been my white whale for a while. I'm trying to put together a course right now on the principles of design. It's a super, super deep and broad subject that I see very little good education about outside of schools. It's very difficult to teach without planning it super well and being very thoughtful. But I'm trying to put together a course about that. I think videos are the best way to learn it, actually, even better than in person, I believe, because the principles are so broad that I think that they're best understood when you can show tons of examples and show videos and go on site and things like that. So yeah, that's pending. That is forthcoming. Give me some time. But if you've never explored the principles of design, rhythm, emphasis, variety, economy, repetition, balance, movement, and continuity, unity, proportion, scale, all of those. If you heard me rattle those off and you were like, oh, those are a thing, you got to go learn them. You really can't be surprised to hear that those are a thing if you want to be a designer. They are essential. They're just base information, and you need to know them pretty deeply. They have practical elements. They have psychological aspects. They're a real thing. They're a damn real thing. And they're a big thing. So go out there, check them out, look them up, learn about them, and apply them to your work. They are essential. All right. So I think we're just about wrapped on this drawing here. I'm struggling with this foot. I had an early version of it in there and did a bunch of work on it. Something was bothering me about it. And there I erased it and just replaced it with a more an emergency foot, just a more top view foot that I thought was good enough, but not quite. I look at it now, I really should have just found a better way to make the foreshortened looking down the barrel of the toes foot work. Was a little too lazy to go take my socks off and pose my foot in front of the mirror while I sit on the floor. But if we redo this drawing or anything like that, I should probably fix that foot. All right, so this one's at a point where it's like, all right, it gives me the idea. I left no area too completely unfinished, but it is just a study for what I was imagining was something like a sculptural group, maybe a statue. So just some rough indication of the floor and the rocks, just the sculptural elements that would support this thing. But I think I could integrate it better. It was just a look. I really just needed to warm up and get a sketch in. But when I look at this sculptural group again, when I look at, more statues for this project again, I think I will plan their bases and their integration into their supports and their pedestals better, hopefully, on a good day. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for checking out this drawing. Let's see what final thoughts I can leave you with. Never give up. Keep drawing. Have a lot of fun when you draw. Insist on having fun when you draw. And don't just drink the Kool-Aid on crap that people tell you about why you shouldn't be having fun while you're drawing, or how you don't deserve it yet, or there's something you need to do before it's going to be time for you to have fun drawing. Especially don't believe the pernicious lie that you need to be good before you can have fun drawing, and that is at the end of a long road of hating drawing while you get good. Wrong, nonsense, not real. The only thing that makes that real is that you've heard it and you thought it was real, and now you're making it real in your head. It's not. So you've heard the opposite. You don't need to be good to have fun drawing. So just go ahead and have fun the whole time while you get better. There. I said it. Trust me. It's true. You're good. Bye-bye.